حفظ القيادة السورية على أرواح مواطنينا وأمن بلدنا.
Assad does not have significant military capability.
إذا قتلونا معتادا يحددنا.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on Future TV. I'm Linda Tamim and these are today's top stories. The U.S. and Russia reach a deal on the issue of Syrian weapons on the third day of intense negotiations. U.S. President Barack Obama says the U.S. is ready for military action if diplomacy fails on Syria. And former Prime Minister Fouad Sanyura holds talks with President Michel Sleiman over the local political and regional situation. Former Prime Minister Fouad Sanyura has held talks with President Michel Sleiman over the local political and regional situation. Talks addressed government formation and the general political situation in Lebanon, as well as developments in the region. Sleiman also held talks with Sheikh Salem al-Rafi'i from a delegation of the Muslim Scholars Committee over the situation in Tripoli. The delegation stressed the need to enhance stability in the city after the August twin bombings outside two mosques. The groups also discussed Tripoli with Prime Minister Najib Mikati and with Prime Minister-designate Tamam Slam in his Msait Bay residence. Lebanese Forces leader Samir Jaja says the Babda Declaration is necessary for building a strong state. The declaration is an agreement to distance Lebanon from the Syrian conflict. Jaja also criticized Hezbollah, saying that the party's participation in the fighting in Syria alongside the Syrian regime is scaring tourists and investors away and harming the country's financial situation. Cardinal Bshara Rai says Christians should act to stop the spread of fundamentalism and terrorism in the region. Speaking from Romania's Bucharest, Rai says the Christian presence in the East is essential to spreading the values of peace, love and coexistence. Rai's words came during his sermon held on the occasion of the Holy Cross Day. Celebrations were held in different Lebanese regions to mark the celebration, and leading religious figures held services for the occasion. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says Washington and Moscow have agreed on a deal to eliminate Syria's chemical weapons. He says Syria must submit an inventory of its chemical weapons within a week, and inspectors must be on the ground in Syria by November with the goal of eliminating the arms by mid-2014. Kerry's announcement comes on the third day of complex talks with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Geneva.
We have agreed to destroy all chemical weapons, including the possibility of removing weapons for destruction outside of Syria. We have also reached a side agreement on methodology. Sixth, our agreement today strengthens the OPCW, the Organization for the Prevention of Chemical Weapons, Executive Council decision to use the Chemical Weapons Convention extraordinary procedures in order to ensure full implementation. It also provides for UN administrative and logistical support to the OPCW for inspections and destruction. In the event of non-compliance, we have committed to impose measures under Chapter 7 within the UN Security Council.
UN leader Ban Ki-moon confirms he has spoken with UN Arab League envoy Lakhdar Brahimi, and they are hoping to have a second peace conference on Syria sometime in October. Ban says he shares international doubts that Syria's President Bashar al-Assad will respect an international deal on his country's chemical weapons and accuses him of committing many crimes against humanity.
What happened is that he has committed many crimes against humanity, and therefore I'm sure that there will be surely the process of accountability when everything is over. But at this time, first and foremost, we have to help the fighting stop and dialogue, talking begin. That's what I have been saying, that let diplomacy have a chance and peace a chance. That has been my always consistent messaging. Now that with this horrendous specter of chemical warfare, where more than 1,400 people have been killed, we have 5,000 patients exposed by chemical agents. And our team will come out soon with the report.
U.S. President Barack Obama touts the possibility for a diplomatic solution in Syria in his weekly address to American citizens. Obama says the diplomatic solution may come about partially because of the credible threat of U.S. military force. He reiterates that the U.S. is ready for military action if diplomacy fails on Syria.
This week, when I addressed the nation on Syria, I said that in part because of the credible threat of U.S. military force, there is the possibility of a diplomatic solution. Russia has indicated a new willingness to join with the international community in pushing Syria to give up its chemical weapons, which the Assad regime used in an attack that killed more than 1,000 people on August 21st. I also asked Congress to postpone a vote on the use of military force while we pursue this diplomatic path, and that's what we're doing. At my direction, Secretary of State Kerry is in discussions with his Russian counterpart. But we're making it clear that this can't be a stalling tactic. Any agreement needs to verify that the Assad regime and Russia are keeping their commitments. That means working to turn Syria's chemical weapons over to international control and ultimately destroying them. This would allow us to achieve our goal: deterring the Syrian regime from using chemical weapons, degrading their ability to use them, and making it clear to the world that we won't tolerate their use. We've seen indications of progress. As recently as a week ago, the Assad regime would not admit that it possessed chemical weapons. Today it does. Syria has signaled a willingness to join with 189 other nations, representing 98% of humanity, in abiding by an international agreement that prohibits the use of chemical weapons. And Russia has staked its own credibility on supporting this outcome. These are all positive developments. We'll keep working with the international community to see that Assad gives up his chemical weapons so that they can be destroyed. We will continue rallying support from allies around the world who agree on the need for action to deter the use of chemical weapons in Syria. And if current discussions produce a serious plan, I'm prepared to move forward with it. But we are not just going to take Russia and Assad's word for it. We need to see concrete actions to demonstrate that Assad is serious about giving up his chemical weapons. And since this plan emerged only with a credible threat of U.S. military action, we will maintain our military posture in the region to keep the pressure on the Assad regime. And if diplomacy fails, the United States and the international community must remain prepared to act.
The Syrian opposition coalition says it will appoint a provisional prime minister to raise its international credibility as high-stakes diplomacy plays out between Washington and Moscow to resolve Syria's 2.5-year civil war. Coalition officials say they have reached consensus that Ahmad Dami, an independent Islamist, will be appointed to run rebel-held areas where decline into chaos threatens to undermine the opposition to President Bashar al-Assad. Dami, 48, is the Secretary General of the Damascus Declaration, a group of veteran opposition figures who led a peaceful resistance to Assad before the revolt. The SNC has struggled to form a coherent response to a Russian initiative that proposes Assad hands over the country's massive chemical weapons arsenal in return for averting a threatened U.S.-led punitive strike. Still to come in our program, an Egyptian court resumes the trial of toppled dictator Hosni Mubarak. That and more after the break. Welcome back. An Egyptian court has resumed the trial of toppled dictator Hosni Mubarak, who is accused of complicity in the deaths of protesters during the 2011 uprising against his rule. It was his second appearance in the court since he's released from Cairo's Tora prison last month. The 85-year-old former president faces an array of charges, including complicity in the deaths of some 850 people killed in the Arab Spring-inspired uprising against him, and corruption. He had been convicted in June of last year for complicity in the deaths of protesters and sentenced to life in prison, but her trial was ordered in January after he appealed. Supporters of ousted President Mohamed Morsi have staged protests in Cairo and some provinces against the army's overthrowing of the first elected president of Egypt. Muslim Brotherhood supporters have staged rallies in different parts of Egypt to commemorate the people who were killed in the clearing of Rab'a al-Adawiyya Square on August the 14th. Egypt extended its declared state of emergency, which had been scheduled to end on Thursday, by 2 months for security reasons. Meanwhile, Egyptian security forces strengthened security deployments and blocked all main squares. Roads to the important rally sites were also heavily controlled to respond to any potential violence. Around 800 migrants, mainly Syrian, have arrived on the Italian coast in the past 24 hours. The migrants arrived on 3 separate vessels after they were intercepted in the heel of Italy, as well as near the island of Lampedusa and near Sicily's Syracuse. A Coast Guard statement says 171 Syrian migrants, including 44 women and 64 minors, were rescued off the coast of Calabria. Reports say a patrol vessel was dispatched to rescue the migrants after they contacted the Coast Guard Operations Center in Rome several times. The migrants, who were transferred onto a Coast Guard vessel, were taken to the southern port town of Roccella Ionica. And now for news around the world in brief. Riot police have used tear gas to disperse pockets of anti-government demonstrators in several Turkish cities for a 4th night last night. Protesters have rumbled on intermittently since the summer, but intensified again this week after a 22-year-old man, Ahmet Atakan, died during clashes with police in Antakya, near the border with Syria, earlier on Tuesday. Atakan died after falling from a building, but investigations continue into the circumstances of his death. Riot police have swept thousands of striking teachers out of the heart of Mexico City, driving protesters through the streets with tear gas and water cannons in a swift end to the week-long protest against education reforms. Authorities did not report any injuries and claim that more than 20 demonstrators have been arrested. The teachers, who had occupied the Zocalo Square for 3 weeks now, had been ordered to vacate the area ahead of the nation's Independence Day celebrations this weekend. At least 3 people have been killed and 3 wounded after a suicide attack targeting a NATO convoy in Kandahar, Afghanistan. The bomber allegedly detonated his car loaded with explosives near the convoy. The Taliban claimed responsibility for the attack. Gianni Versace's mansion, where he was killed and which was once listed for $125 million, is on auction block. Until recently, it was a boutique hotel listed for $125 million. His home hits the auction block on September the 17th. The bidding will start at $25 million. This unique mansion could be yours if you can afford it.
From outside, you can tell this 10-bedroom mansion on Ocean Drive is iconic. Tourists stop in the street to take pictures of it. That's because right outside of these gates on the street, Gianni Versace was shot and killed just as he was leaving his summer home. More than 10 years later, this man, Barton G., owns the place, and he's got big plans for it.
It will be a luxury hotel with private butler service. It will be VIP membership for only people that are what we call the big rollers.
He gave us a rare, stunning tour of the jaw-dropping details inside, like this incredible pool area.
It's 24-karat gold inlay, and as you can see, the river rock has been, this is all Italian. So the artisans that put this together are bar none some of the best of their kind. As you can see, the work product is unbelievable.
And if you need to casually rinse off from the beach, this masterpiece can help, showing off Versace's opulent and often risque lifestyle.
This is sort of like an understated, simplistic shower. Understated. That you would just, you know, just to wash sand off from the beach or get out of the pool. Right, or after a fabulous massage. And there is 1, 2, 3, there's like 7 showers in here.
The views are spectacular from any of the elaborate suites. The walls are hand-painted, and it's all just a part of the exaggerated decor.
So this is how the other half looks.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But anybody can live it temporarily if they like.
And here's a once-in-a-lifetime sight, Versace's old bedroom, with the biggest bed I've ever seen.
Totally worth purchasing if you can. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. The U.S. and Russia reach a deal on the issue of Syrian weapons on the 3rd day of intense negotiations. U.S. President Barack Obama says the U.S. is ready for military action if diplomacy fails on Syria. And finally, former Prime Minister Fuad Sanura holds talks with President Michel Sleiman over the local political and regional situation. Those are your Saturday headlines from the English news team here at Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, wishing you all a very nice weekend.
من حفظ القيادة السورية على أرواح مواطنينا وأمن بلدنا.
Assad does not have significant military capability.
إذا قتلونا مع اليابان يحددنا.